Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for our next session that we're going to broadcast again here from the Meistersaal in Berlin, hybrid event. We're actually going to have a panelist here on stage. But on the way to getting into the issue of urban air mobility, let me take you along one of a thought line and take you to one of my favorite films ever. I don't know if you actually saw it once before, but 23 years ago, the makers of The Fifth Element had Bruce Willis as a desperate flight taxi operator fly and fight for his escape in his aerotaxi in the corridors, in the narrow corridors above a future megacity, navigating against the automated flight path system that could have been drawn up by Unifly Aero, the participant of our last session. But some of these glimpses into the future of urban flying are already happening. They are just a couple of steps away from reality. The thought is just appealing, and to leave the crowded streets and just go above and be fast. For me, actually, one of the best rides of my life was from the center of Sao Paulo to the airport in 15 minutes with maximum brilliant views over this megacity, instead of being in a car for 3 hours in hundreds of traffic jams, or that very exclusive hop from Nice airport to Monaco to go to a conference. Okay, fine, a customer paid for that. And of course, in those days, nobody really worried too much about the emissions we were causing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is this absolute fascination with urban air mobility. And as Uli Bubinger said this morning, there are more than 90 million entries in Google. So there must be something that moves people that is of core interest. Now, in this session, we're going to meet a couple of pioneers. And let me introduce the panel to you and then the session chairman. We have Yu Long of the Sonaca group. He's CTO there, but he's going to be talking on behalf of ASD, Aerospace Defense Association of Europe. Welcome in this panel. We have Tassilo Wanner here in the Meistersaal, absolutely brilliant. He is the Vice President, Global Public and Regulatory Affairs at Lilium GmbH. And for those of you who might have the wrong associations, just as I had, I thought it had something to do with the Lily, but of course Otto Lilienthal is just much more of a pioneer in flying and therefore sponsored the name. Florian Reuter is with Volocopter. He is the CEO and managing director there and has a lot to say about getting from A to B in a much faster manner. Jörg-Peter Müller, Airbus Helicopters, Managing Director, and of course, Airbus would not want to miss out on something that is new, that is radical, that is innovative. And last but not least, maybe I would love to introduce and give you not the red carpet, but the blue, the aerial carpet, Patrick Key as the Executive Director of EASA, European Union Aviation Safety Agency. And the one big question that I hope will come out, whether urban air mobility is actually revolutionizing the air industry. So with that, I hope that you have a fantastic panel.
Thank you very much, Connie. Good morning to everyone. And Connie, you have certainly very good taste, both for movies, but also in using very good services in Sao Paulo and Nice. So congratulations for that. Now, this panel is fascinating because it will indeed look at what is possible, what is feasible, what is desirable. And I think we will have a lot of discussions hopefully in this panel on what is the society needs, what is the business model for urban air mobility, what are the expectations from the society. And when you look at the current pandemic, I'm not going to talk about COVID, don't worry, but you feel that there certainly could be an appetite for an enhanced, dedicated urban air mobility, which would basically provide, how should I say, a very safe and efficient and effective transport mode from A to B when you go from a city to an airport, for instance. So as you mentioned, we have distinguished speakers with us in this panel. And the way we are going to organize the discussions is that I'm going to ask each and every one of you to answer first guiding question in 5 minutes, which would enable us to kick off the discussions. And then when all of you have made your pitch statements and your first analysis on what is at stake, we will open the discussion with the public. So I'm going to start with you, Hugues, and welcome here again. In your view, what are the conditions for urban air mobility to succeed? Hugues, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for having me there. I am, in fact, as you said, representing ASD, which is the Aerospace and Defense Industry Association of Europe, which has as member the member states, and maybe we can have the next slide. Here you see the different member states being part of ASD, and also the major contributors in the aerospace industry, which are members. And what is interesting is that ASD has launched a specific working group on urban air mobility, which are represented here, which has a task to work on 3 subjects to try to define a common position across the sector. The first one being to reach safe and sustainable urban air mobility. The second one being to find a way to integrate seamlessly the urban air mobility and the existing ground transportation system. And third subject is to find value. You were speaking of business case, is to find value in the UAM for all stakeholders, and including the cities, of course, in line with the European Innovation Partnership in smart cities and communities. Myself, I am the CTO of Sonaca Group, which is specialized in aerostructure. And I have been personally involved within Sonaca in UAM by offering to startups in UAM scale-up capabilities in aerostructure development, which is our specialty. And also I have participated building a consortium in around Living Tomorrow in Brussels, maybe you know of that, which is in fact a project to make a showcase about UAM transportation from the Zaventem airport to Brussels city. So to answer to your question, in fact, there is a problem with urban mobility, and everybody knows about traffic congestion. And of course, adding an air segment to that, which is the principle of UAM, being able to fly people and goods over crowded areas, is part of the solution. However, we think at ASD that some conditions must be met in order to for a UAM to become a success. The first condition would be, and that's a given, to reach a very high level of safety, which is typical of aerospace, which is using very high quality standards through the development and manufacturing phase, and also to be controlled by a very secure air traffic management. And today, EASA for Europe has published a set of regulation under the SC Vital, which has to be followed by the UAM manufacturer to certify their aircraft. And also there are lots of work going on to build traffic management for less classical aviation, like the UTM for unmanned aviation, and it would be necessary to build the same for the UAM. That's the first condition. So the second condition would be to be environmental friendly, and the description of that is given for Europe, at least, in the Green Deal, where there are very high ambition in gas emissions, noise emission, air quality, and we would add at ASD the visual pollution, which would come with far crowded airspace with respect to what we know today with helicopters, like in Sao Paulo. And what is sure is that using electric energy and electric propulsion is certainly a way to reach these objectives, except that at the production side, you have to produce electricity with a zero CO2 emission balance, which is not yet proven today, even with biofuels. So the third criterion would be to find a way to integrate seamlessly the UAM with the ground existing transportation system. Because if you want to use a new UAM system, as a user, the least you expect is to make point-to-point on-time travel. And the only way to do it is to physically connect the future vertical ports to the existing ground mobility system. Also, you need to support the users with a full digital connection so that traveling from A to B is entirely on your smartphone and completely supported by your smartphone. And the fourth and last but not least condition is to find a value in the UAM. Every stakeholder should find a value in this concept. For instance, the manufacturer and the operators should find a good business case. The city administrator should see the traffic congestion cost decrease without spending too much money on infrastructure, which is in fact good news for UAM because it doesn't require as much investment as railways and subways and roads. That, of course, will include the users which want to be offered affordable ticket price. And that is directly linked to the fact that the manufacturers are able to design their product for a given price, or better, a given total cost of ownership. And that would allow the operators of these products to offer tickets at an affordable price and still make a profit. And that's a very big challenge because in one point you have to produce goods or products with a very high aerospace quality, and on the other side you have to produce low cost, which usually points towards a very heavy industrialization, which can only be paid for by a given scale of operation, which should be important. So we think that if all these conditions are met, UAM will be a success.
Thank you very much, Hugues. And there will be a lot of areas for discussion, I'm sure, in the panel later on. Tassilo, turning to you now. And we're discussing about the business cases. What do you think will be the initial use cases and how will they develop over time?
Do you guys hear me? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Patrick Key, for having us. And thank you very much also for making Lilium of a part of a group actually that is hopefully leading jointly with others, and I think this panel is a great representation, Europe into an age of new advanced aerial air mobility. Before I come to the answer to your question, Patrick, I would like to familiarize the audience just very briefly with what the Lilium aircraft is, because based on the quite specific design, actually, there is, we think, quite specific use cases also that can be offered on basis of the aircraft. It is fully electric. It is lifting vertically. At the same time, as opposed to many others in the space, this is actually a fixed-wing aircraft with 36 fully electric ducted fan engines on basically 4 wings, 2 wings and 2 canards, distributed quite neatly around the center of gravity of the fuselage of the aircraft. And what allows us to do with that is after some segment of vertical climb, that is really only a few feet actually only, we can start what we call the transition, which is kind of the signature maneuver of the Lilium aircraft, where we tilt the engine seamlessly in a position so that the aircraft basically transforms itself into a fixed-wing aircraft with all the implications that come with it. And I'd only like to highlight 3 dimensions that come out of that flight physics. One is the efficiency, and therefore also the specifications of the aircraft in terms of a range up to 300 kilometers on a single battery charge, as well as a top speed of 300 kilometers per hour, and that is reached very, very fast after takeoff. And also the fact that up to 5 human beings will be possible to be transported on board the aircraft, one of which is the pilot, but there is also 4 passenger seats. And I will go into implications in a second when I will deep dive into use cases. The other is that this design, as many other designs for eVTOL, puts us in a position to design the aircraft ultra-redundant so that it is also safe and complies with the 10 to the minus 9 safety target that EASA have put out for eVTOL under SC-VTOL to operate over also cities in Europe. And the third is really the high utilization that comes with it. If we basically multiply the number of seats that we have with the range of the aircraft, it is just outstanding in terms of how many passenger kilometers can be produced on basis of a rather obviously small and simple vehicle. If we think of use cases and take the 300 kilometers radius around where we are being based out of our headquarters in Munich, you see that even something like Munich to Zurich is becoming possible on basis of electric aviation. And that is a game changer, not only in aviation, but in transportation in general. I think the second best alternative is actually in terms of public transport to take the bus, which is actually the preferred option that even the railroad would offer if you are looking for connections between the two. And that is taking 4.5 hours actually for a single ride. At the same time, obviously, eVTOL can also be a solution for the shorter hop. And there is obviously, for example, the famous, infamous 37 kilometers between Munich city center and Munich airport on a OD, on an origin destination such as that. We could maybe turn around once, if everything goes well, even twice per hour, and basically transport 8 or 12 people on a single vehicle with a single pilot per hour. And that's just very, very different orders of magnitude, actually, as opposed to public transportation as we see it for now in small vehicles. A taxi typically transports 0.5 passengers per hour on average. So this is, 10-fold, 20-fold stronger in terms of the passenger kilometers that can be produced on a single hour. And therefore, this outweighs basically also the higher cost for the vehicle, because obviously the vehicle is more expensive than a car, and our aircrew is also more expensive than a cab driver, but not by a factor of 10 or 20. So that puts us into a position to really serve regional routes as well at a relatively competitive price point already at the beginning. We are very grateful for the great collaboration with EASA, especially also on the flight standard side, where there's very, very strong rulemaking tasks that have been set up to look into the operational frameworks under which drones will be operated once the pilot will be taken out of the cockpit, and so operations can even scale further and the price can be reduced. But the pricing that we are seeing here actually is really pricing that we believe is possible on day one with still the pilot on board and also very humble networks at the beginning, VFR in BMC conditions and so on. And then over time, once we've gained experience jointly as an industry together with the regulator, it then hopefully can be scaled. Obviously, this is quite a significant endeavor and challenge that we have been taking on. So we are glad that we are not alone. Having been founded by 4 aerospace engineers out of Munich University, we have grown within 5 years to a team of some 600 people. That includes veterans of the aviation industry, obviously, and some of them will be familiar faces to many of you. If we think of Brian, our CTO, who was the number 2 in the Eurofighter program. If we think of Yves Yemsi, who was leading quality in the A350 program, now in charge of all our program steering, actually. And obviously, this is also based on significant funding that we were able to attract to Germany. The challenge is large. It is still years out before these aircraft will be operated commercially, but it is very good to know that we are not out there by ourselves, but working very closely together with both the regulatory authorities as well as the industry. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tassilo. This is fascinating, and again, we will have discussions on the market model and the use cases that you described. Now, let me turn to Florian Reuter. Florian, I think you are having difficulties in connection, but I hope you can hear us and that you can speak as well. So we heard your 2 colleagues on the conditions for UAM to succeed. We heard about the plans for Lilium. So Florian, the question to you is, what is real and what are the conditions met? What is real and what is yet to come from your perspective? Florian, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we do.
Okay, excellent. Just wanted to get quick confirmation. So unfortunately, I cannot be with you in Berlin right now, but I'm happy to do it in this format. So hello to Berlin, hello to all the panelists and everyone that is tuning in remotely in these very unprecedented times and challenging circumstances. My name is Florian, I'm CEO of Volocopter, and I would ask the operator to move forward to slide number 2. To show what is the challenge that we have set out as an industry to take on. Right? It is the existing emissions and congestion levels that we see in cities all around the world. And this is what we have set out to provide a solution to. We're certainly not going to be the ultimate solution. We're not the individual piece that will bring the solution, but we strive to be a significant part of the solution in the city of the future, enabling a better future, a safer and greener future for all of us. So if we move forward to the next slide, there's a picture of a Volocopter, flying in the urban center of Paris, for example. We just had a big announcement some 8 weeks ago in Paris, where we are getting ready to establish a first urban air mobility route, an air taxi route, to be ready for the upcoming 2024 Olympics. So we want to make electrical flight within our cities an everyday reality, both for the citizens of the city as well as travelers all around the world coming to the city. We want to save them time, right? Ensure that they arrive predictably at their destination, and all of that while providing a truly fascinating experience, which is flying over the city that you live in or that you are visiting. So I said coming into the session, what is real and what is yet to come. So if we go to the next slide, you see our current product lineup. You see the Volo drone on the left side and the Volo City on the right side. For us, urban air mobility encompasses both the transportation of passengers as well as of goods, because what is true in terms of the features that we can bring to the people is also true in terms of what benefits we can bring to the urban logistical chains. And that's why we have decided to not only pursue the air taxi route, but also, build on a highly synergistic Volo drone that from a technology and certification standpoint is to 90% identical to our manned vehicle. So we can adhere to the highest safety standards and provide a completely safe, and beneficial additional means of transporting goods in our cities. As Volocopter, we aim to show first commercial proof points with our Volodrone next year and with VoloCity towards the end of 2022. We're extremely partnership-oriented and pragmatic. So, when we set out, we were kind of giving ourselves the intention of what vehicle provides a viable performance specifications today and can be both be built with existing technology and can be certified according to today's standards. And with today's technology, we can build these two vehicles. And you see the features of these vehicles, on the slide. One of the performance determining factors is clearly, where is battery technology today? We are all electric. We believe in all electric, especially on the air taxi vehicle. Right now we're at about 250 watt hours per kilogram on a cell level, right? When it comes to the energy density that we can, use in certifiable battery technology today. Of course, if this grows over the coming years, this will significantly positively impact the features and the performance that we can bring to our vehicles. By now, we have flown 3 different generations of vehicles across the world. We have done numerous demonstrations in the public, always with full authority approval, and we are about 2 years away from type certificate. So if we move on to the next slide, and kind of envision a future where the urban air mobility industry wants to serve the customer, because ultimately that's what it's all about, right? To bring benefit to our customers. And, we have to establish the necessary ecosystem elements in order for us to be able to provide our services. And that comes with great opportunities because it's a white sheet of paper, but also it comes with a lot of challenges. And some of those, I have listed here on this slide. So if we fast forward 2 years, right, we have received the type certificate for our vehicles. We are still away, from actually being able to offer our service. So we need to make sure that all of these other ecosystem elements are in place within that same time frame in order to start our operations. So we need to make sure that we have not only the certified vehicle, we need to have the right landing and charging sites, the airspace integration. We've had, heard Hugues talk about it, or in the earlier session on Unifly. We have to gain public acceptance, the acceptance of the city and the lawmakers there. So all of that has to come together to really make urban air mobility a reality. And of course, a significant element here, and we've called a game changer, is the advent of fully autonomous flight. So if you move forward to the next slide, in order to connect all of these necessary elements of the ecosystem, we are investing heavily in building the necessary digital backend to really bring all of those processes together with an eye to optimize the safety, but also the cost, and ultimately ensuring a fantastic customer experience. And of course, this digital backend is also the prerequisite for subsequently full autonomous operations. So this is really important going forward. So what sets us apart? It's the maturity of our technology as demonstrated in our flights all over the world. It's the progress and certification that we've made with EASA first and foremost, but also with many other authorities around the world that have approved our demonstration flights so far. And thirdly, it's the partnership landscape that we have built. So if we move on to the next slide, here's an illustration of all of the partners that we are working together with. When I say pragmatic and partnership oriented, we are building this complete ecosystem together with our partner, and we have some of the most credible and renowned names in aviation and in the wider tech industry that are supporting us. Not only our excellent relationship with EASA, but also working with Lufthansa, ADAC Luftrettung, Fraport, Diehl, and others. Daimler, Intel, Micron, Schenker have all invested in us. So obviously, we do see that there's some skepticism in the wider public, but in our day-to-day operations, all we see is a great confidence and ever more credible partners coming together, working with us to make this a reality. So if we go on to the last slide, this is a picture from our demonstration that we did in Singapore last year. And this is real, right? We had a fully operational Voloport infrastructure, landing and maintenance infrastructure there on site. We were flying piloted in the heart of the city, fully integrated in their airspace management system. So really, it is becoming reality as we speak. There's interest from stakeholders all around the world. We have the elements in place, and this is a whole industry taking shape, ready for takeoff. So I very much look forward to welcome you all on board very soon. and happy to be part of this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian. So this is becoming a reality, and the last panelist to take the floor for this first part of the session is Jörg-Peter Müller from Airbus. So we heard those startup companies saying that everything is real, everything is coming soon. How do the incumbents like Airbus make a difference in this highly competitive market?
So yeah, thank you very much, Patrick. And when you say the word incumbent, it sounds pretty heavy, I have to admit, and it sounds a bit frightening. But believe me, it is not, and we have an approach to the question. I'm very glad to be on this panel, I have to say, and thank you to the previous speakers that set the scene so well. And I think we all share the same passion and appreciation. We're chasing the same goal of bringing the next generation of aeronautical services to the benefits of society, and basically to use them, all of us, I guess. We are looking very much forward to that. And it's that richness, and I would include EASA as the agency as well, it's that richness of ideas and competencies and creativity that comes together to make this a sustainable, safe, and economically viable future for all of us. So thanks for that. Now going to Airbus as the incumbent in the field. You might have heard it yesterday from our CEO, Guillaume Faury, or even our CTO, Grazia Vittadini, here in this forum. For us, for Airbus, the zero emission strategy is a key element going forward. And we have laid out a roadmap until 2035, where we have an ambition to fly the first commercial services, enter into service, commercial airplanes. Now, innovation is obviously in the DNA of Airbus, and these kind of ideas, like urban air mobility as well, liberate enormous amounts of energy and passion in the company, in the teams. And we think that urban air mobility is actually the very first brick in this. Urban air mobility is a relatively manageable scale. It is a power class that's of several hundred kilowatts, not megawatts. So it's actually similar to cars or high-performance sports cars, electrical ones. It's operating in a very well-defined environment. It doesn't require outrageous performance like speed or range. And here are different use cases, as we also heard from Volocopter and Lilium. And so all in all, we think that actually there's a real market waiting for us. The value is clear to everybody, and the technologies of getting there are relatively close, are relatively in reach. So all in all, with that, we think at Airbus that this is a great investment for us. And despite the pandemic and the difficult situation that the industry is in, we have confirmed and even are accelerating our efforts in urban air mobility. So having said this, let me just illustrate a little bit on how we go about it. So the a company like ours is obviously has obviously a huge richness of ideas and creativity and projects. Just to cite one figure, Airbus holds 37,000 patents worldwide. And just as an indicator of how much actually innovation potential is in this company. And when we started to build this urban air mobility strategy at the very beginning in 2014, one of the first elements was to gather all those ideas and projects and create some transparency that's already existing within Airbus to build this. And we had a huge project room back in the days, and we have covered the walls with all these ideas and project descriptions, and got the inspiration from that for the first urban air mobility strategy. I just put a few examples of what we are doing today and that are very closely related and that we as urban air mobility draw upon. There's things around zero emission, going all the way to alternative energies and hydrogen. There are efforts about autonomy. We did fly this summer an autonomous taxi takeoff and landing demonstrator Atoll on an A350 based on vision-based autonomous technology. Then we have another example is we've done noise measurements this summer in an urban frame with a helicopter overflying an urban environment, and we took measurements on the ground, and to figure out how is noise propagating and how is the effect on the people on the ground, and how can we optimize that. And we found out that actually the environment and the facades and the buildings have a huge impact on the perceived noise. And all these things are benefiting not only urban air mobility, but also our products, helicopters that overfly a city, be it for emergency medical services or whatever mission. are benefiting from this kind of technology. We have a test bed like this flight lab that is actually kind of allowing to develop autonomous technology or alternative drive technology. And what we're also working on that we have set up from the beginning is a UTM working group that brings us close to the airspace management aspect. That's very key, as we've heard before. And even the WOOM service, which actually we operated in Sao Paulo, as Connie said at the beginning, perhaps she was using our service, I don't know, but that's kind of a service we had been running in exploratory mode for 3 years in Sao Paulo, Mexico City, and that allows as well to gain an understanding of real passengers, or real life operations in a real environment of a city or an airport. And that brought us basically to where we are today, to the knowledge we are today. Give me just two more slides. The first one I wanted to say is that we obviously have also a vehicle development undergoing. So we have actually 2 vehicles at the very extreme end of the design space. One, we call it the Vahana, that was flying in the US. The last flight was happening actually almost exactly 1 year ago. And this is in a category where we say it's about 730 kilograms max takeoff weight. It can carry about 1 passenger would be able to carry. It's a demonstrator, 1 passenger. But I've been there and witnessed the flight of 50 kilometers of range and at 100 knots, 185 kilometers an hour roughly. And that's working. And the other demonstrator we are currently flying in Donauwörth and Manching since the summer in Manching in southern Germany is the city Airbus. And we had a great flight just 2 days ago. And this is a vehicle that's actually of representative size for a future urban air mobility system. So it could hold roughly 4 passengers. It's about 2.2 tons. And this is built it's not a racehorse. It's not to be actually a product in the stricter sense, but it allows us to build all the capabilities, simulation tools, to gather the data, show that this kind of vehicles are controllable and so on. And we're making great progress on this as well. And we're looking into further flights. So just to sum up, and as my predecessors, my previous speakers have already talked about it, it's about an ecosystem. It's about working together on all the aspects we heard about, on the technology, on the safety of the operations, on the infrastructure, and on bringing an efficient service to market and to the passenger ultimately. And we only can make that happen if we all work together. So thank you very much for that. I just wanted to put the team, the City Airbus team in this case, to represent all the innovation power I was talking about in Airbus. We are very grateful to them to make that happen, and I'm looking very much forward to the debate here in the panel now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jörg-Peter. So if we listen to all of you, basically all is easy to take what Jörg-Peter was saying. You know, the technology is there. There are no major difficulties, and what also Tassilo and Florian were mentioning. You know, it seems that we'll get there quite soon and quite easily. Now you are all talking about, and it was also one of the conditions set out by Hugues earlier. And all of you mentioned, you know, this ecosystem, to take the term that you used, Jörg-Peter. And I think one of the major players in this ecosystem is going to be the cities. So what would you expect from the cities? That they just you know, agree and buy your infrastructure or your concept? What more would you expect from them? And I will start with you, Florian, on this.
Thank you, Patrick. So, you know, of course, we don't have great expectation towards the city. We're pretty much just acting to, you know, what the cities tell us. And fortunate enough, we have been in very close interaction with numerous cities around the world so far. And we always kind of go along the lines of, okay, why is the city interested in speaking to us? Why is the city interested in urban air mobility? Do they have, you know, a realistic expectation towards the benefit of urban air mobility or not? And then secondly, it's always, do we have all stakeholders involved that we need in order to ultimately get green light for the introduction of urban air mobility, because we always have a very complex setup of stakeholders, right? There's always the National Civil Aviation Authority, the airspace manager, the city, usually the region or state in forms of transport ministry and so on. And at least them, and usually many more stakeholders, need to align around a common objective of introducing urban air mobility. And the cities where we are active usually have this alignment already achieved amongst themselves and are actively inviting us to kind of, enter into a discussion on how do we, make this a reality and what are the benefits that this can ultimately bring to the citizens of a city. And this is a very fascinating exchange. And when you hear about, certain cities that are more active than others in that space, those are the cities, like Singapore, like Dubai, Los Angeles, and so on. Those are the cities that are very actively working on making this a reality, that have project teams on a city level, very actively working with us, but also with other players to make this a reality in a very concrete way. And of course, I want to mention Paris, because Paris is also a clear leader in the space.
I don't see the... Thank you very much, Florian. Jörg-Peter, what do you agree, and do you see cities as partners, and how do you see the relationship?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, cities are a key stakeholder, and the ecosystem within the city, this is a key stakeholder to make urban air mobility a success. So what we are doing, actually, a colleague of mine is doing on behalf of the European Commission, is animating the network of the EIP-SCC, the European Innovation Partnership for Smart Cities and Communities. And that brings together, I think it's 42 cities now, in a network that allows them to exchange, to gain a common knowledge of what UAM is, and also to kind of bring the local ecosystem together to make it happen in their city, to implement it in their city. And I think it's firstly very important that we have a clear view. Florian talked about it as well, a clear view of what actually urban air mobility can bring and how to integrate it into cities. And what we have done extensive simulations that kind of show the benefits and how that integrates, and from kind of which area of the cities there would be a real value created to the population for which kind of trajectory, so that the cities can also measure what actually and how this could influence their public policy or kind of their urbanization plans, even to some extent. So yes, it's key. It's a question of policy. It's a question of support. It's a question of public acceptance. We cannot, or we should not, we will not work introducing a new transport system which is not supported by the local population and the city representing them. So yes, obviously it's really key that the public stakeholders, the cities, are part and very closely working with us in making UAM a reality.
Well, that's a fascinating topic, because, and we will come back to that. If you discuss with cities, depending on the appetite for innovation, or depending on the appetite for environmental protection, you may have very different standards, which may make things quite difficult for you to deal with. But we'll come back to that. Tassilo, it's a slightly different business model that you have for your offer, because you will deal with cities, but also with regions. And so how would you see these types of partnerships, and how do you think, what are the challenges for that?
I fully agree with everything that has been said. At the same time, I also kind of slightly disagree in one specific way. And what I mean by that is, I think it depends a bit on what time horizon we are looking, right? Is it the, humble point-to-point, also scheduled VFR pilot on board operations at the beginning? And for those, I would claim we have a fantastic ecosystem already in place. I mean, aviation is the safest means of transportation. It is everything that, for example, the automotive industry wants to get to in terms of ACEs. Autonomous, okay, we are highly automated, but connected, we are electric. So it ticks already a lot of boxes, and we can, for initial operations, integrate into these systems, processes, and the existing ecosystem already. Obviously, when it is then about scaling things, this is a tremendous challenge. And many, many things have to happen. I'm actually very confident and proud that also under EASA's leadership, Europe is really the front runner here with all the rulemaking that is ongoing in the different domains, especially with respect to operations and flight standards and ATM, and also the space initiative by the European Commission. To shed some extra light on it and also what the expectation for cities and regions from our perspective would be, some of you may have seen that in September we have announced partnerships, confirmed partnerships actually, with the airports of Cologne and Düsseldorf respectively, to make them hubs of a regional network in mostly North Rhine-Westphalia. And just 2 weeks ago announced something similar for Florida, where actually in that case a private developer, so not a city, not a public entity, but a private developer committed to build multiple landing sites across central Florida. So those will be, again, nodes in a network for initial operations that are very much in line with existing regulatory frameworks, certified aircraft to existing standards, pilot on board, all the typical navigation communication equipment on board, communication over voice happening with ATC. But obviously we are happy to contribute already, and we have been doing that for the past years, to the future frameworks on which scale up of operations hopefully will be possible in a timely manner as well.
I was wondering, but I will turn to Hugues now, but I was wondering if any of you have been in contact and building partnership with cities which are run by environmental party people. But I give you some time to think about it. Hugues, it seems that your last condition is met, no? That cities, and you were mentioning city administrators, find in this partnership some added value. So is this the case? Do you think that in terms of partnership with local authorities, everything is well, or do we need to continue to work on this?
Well, I think not everything is well, because it's a problem with innovation. It's difficult for people to understand what will happen effectively. So they understand what happens with helicopters, but they don't know what will happen with a new system. They see, in fact, prototypes, flying experiments, and demonstration done notably by Volocopter and Lilium here present, but they don't grasp what the benefit could be for them, because they have no use of this kind of thing. And it's always the same with people which are used to work in a given environment and are only trying to move step by step. Here it's a drastic change. There will be maybe corridors above the cities where a lot of flights will be performed per day. There was a simulation for Paris, because we were speaking of Paris, which reckoned that they need, I mean, the stakeholders to find a business case, like 3,000 flights per hour over Paris. So you start understanding why the cities administrators are a bit afraid, because they feel that the public will react badly to that, because they are used to see from time to time one helicopter, and even if you tell them it makes less noise, it's electric, etc., still that's a problem. So for me, we still have to work with them, explain, show them what will happen, so that they really understand what will happen. And my other fear is that each city will want to have proper regulation. They will impose a standard for using their sky, I would say, which will not necessarily be the same everywhere. And that means the operators of UAMs will have to adapt to different requirements everywhere, which is for me a big challenge, because when you design a system with something in mind, and it might be a new exercise each time you are confronted with city requests.
So that makes a lot of sense. Just for you to know, I'm not here to advertise what EASA does, but just for you to know that we are just launching a study on the so-called societal acceptance of UAM, which will look at safety levels, but also environmental indicators of what would be acceptable for the different types of populations in cities and rural areas and so on and so forth. So hopefully this would enable us to have a common approach for Europe in terms of standard setting. And it will also help us defining what should be the target in terms of certification for those aircraft. Now, just a word to the organizers. I don't have access to the questions. So if you want to, you can choose questions and ask them, and then I will direct the question to one of the panelists, if you want, because I can't see them. Just does anyone want to come in on the relationship with the green parties, and are your offers, your products convincing to green people? What do you think, Jörg-Peter? I'm sure your products are very convincing.
Well, I think, you know, the aerospace industry at large has some kind of reputation in terms of environmental friendliness at the moment. And obviously there's a lot of things that we can work on and we need to work on, and our ambition is to work on it. So perhaps let me take a bit of a stance from a technology point of view. So we can do a lot of making these vehicles as environmental friendly as possible. So we can work on noise. I showed a short study we had, but we're having a lot of activity on that. We're doing wind tunnel tests to optimize the vehicle, the propellers, things like that. We can have a lot of operational procedures, and this now is beyond the vehicle. Operational procedures to minimize the impact on the ground and to show to the cities and the population in the cities actually that we can fly along existing infrastructure, that we can overfly areas more like industrial areas, that we can actually have landing infrastructure at spots where they do not have such a negative impact on the population around it. So there's a lot of things that we can do to make it more environment friendly. However, I would also like to say that this is a flying vehicle and it will need more energy than driving on the ground. You can optimize how you use it. Tassilo had a very interesting points on that. Yeah, you can improve the productivity and so on, but still flying takes energy, and energy does not come for free, even if you produce it with CO2 neutral means, and even if you store without creating or store it in a way that you do not create energy, CO2 over a city. But all this, I think, is fundamental, that this is a coherent story, that we take care of the broad setup here, in order to make it as environment friendly as possible. But still, it's not always convincing everybody, of course, and it's only taking the technology angle.
So who wants to take this subject as well? Florian, what's your take? You have how do you deal with the green parties?
Thank you for the setting the challenge. So just to give you an example, if we take Stuttgart, for example, right? It's a city in Germany known because it is governed by a green mayor. It is governed, or it is part of Baden-Württemberg, which is governed by a green led coalition. And the Stuttgart people are known for not agreeing to everything, as we have all experienced in the past years. So, we had the fortune to actually make a public demonstration in Stuttgart last year. We were flying in front of a crowd of 12,000 people, and we conducted a scientific survey together with the university, and kind of asked the people on their perceptions of urban air mobility. And the most interesting part of this was we asked them before and after the flight. And it is so great to see and rewarding to see on how we were able to really improve public perception by showcasing the technology and making people aware of kind of educating them around what this technology will look like, will feel like, will sound like, in order to create a more informed, a better informed opinion. And it was great for us to see that people the majority did find it acceptable to have this mode of transport in their city. They were pleasantly surprised by the low sound levels and so on. And yes, of course, on the sustainability aspect, I think we also need to be convincing going forward. But I think we have the arguments at hand that this has an opportunity to build a fully sustainable means of transport. In fact, I would disagree to your earlier statement of saying that cities are very different. No matter where we go around the world, I think in terms of the safety standards, the noise and emission standards that they want to get to, we see a great conversion of requirements. And I see some, attempts all around the world to kind of set certain standards, and cities starting to exchange with each other, and Airbus also mentioned that we have those on a European level. We also have them, for example, as part of the World Economic Forum activities, where they have released 7 principles of urban air mobility, which we also buy into, which all kind of attempt to bring people together and kind of set certain standards that ultimately will also include public acceptance. And just one last point, in order to really convince the public and bring it along, because there's no way that we will introduce this new mode of transport against the public opinion or politicians and regulators. I think 2 things are extremely important. One is we need to show the technology, to give everyone the opportunity to familiarize themselves with the technology, and that's why it's so important for us to conduct these public demonstration flights. And secondly, we're kind of trying to give an as proper visualization of the long-term effects and benefits and effects of urban air mobility. For example, by now partnering with PTV Group, right? They are the world leader in using mobility data sets to really visualize the effects that potentially new mode of transport like Volocopter, like urban air mobility, will have on a city's overall landscape. And we have announced this partnership just now and are going to release very exciting, visualizations that help cities to really get a better picture of what this will feel like for them and their citizens in their particular context. So we, put a lot of emphasis on these educational elements to really get public acceptance to be operating at wider scale.
Okay. Tassilo, you want to comment on this?
Yes, on the basis of the experience that we have made, I can fully echo what Florian was just saying, and actually underpin also with some data, actually. So when it comes to noise, I mean, it's impressive how silent the vehicles are. I've actually observed Volocopter flying in Singapore myself. It was quite impressive, I must say, Florian, and I think everyone was impressed by the low noise levels. Also, Lilium is committed, and actually in terms of the current generation of demonstrator, already below 65 dB at 100 meters. And we are very confident that the serial aircraft will significantly be below that threshold. So this is what, in line with current regulation actually in cities in Europe, in the US, and in other Western and beyond countries, actually can be done within existing frameworks already within a city. In terms of the relationship to different political parties, I was actually surprised myself. I've been working very, very closely in my career previously with the Green Party, but even on basis of the positive expectations that I had, I was surprised how open the Green Party is. I think is, as Florian is saying, a matter of familiarization in the first place with key stakeholders. And when we run through the numbers with them and show them the CO2 footprint, which is actually the other impressive dimension, especially on basis of the high throughput of our aircraft, but also, and that applies to the whole industry, when we take into account that no infrastructure is needed between A and B, and also no large infrastructure in terms of airports is needed, it's actually tremendous in terms of what numbers can be reached. In case of the Lilium aircraft, this will actually long-term, when we have switched to green electricity 100%, be in the same ballpark as high-speed rail in terms of CO2 per passenger kilometer. And then maybe to add one additional dimension, it is also about the trust building that obviously, and by the nature of things, over the past few years has happened more in the back, actually. So when we think of our Florida and of our North Rhine-Westphalia partnerships, both of them are based on a very, very deep and thorough collaboration and study, and Deutsche Flugsicherung having, agreed on certain procedures and so on since 2018. So we are not the kind of project who are going out if there is, an MOU. The MOU with Düsseldorf and Cologne was signed years ago. We are not going out to the public if you're joining a consortium or so, but when the work is being done and that we have agreed on a certain case. And so with that familiarization that has been going on the state level, on the city level, and so on, I think this industry, and I'm sure that the others have done the same, has also proven to be very serious, in as much as cities have made bad experiences over the past few years with, bicycle companies that have put 6,000 bicycles into a city overnight, and the city finds out, from the newspaper or by running into one the next morning, and then they have to figure how to regulate it and how to deal with it. And I think this industry is very, very well advised to continue the approach of very close liaison very early on, years and years before operations would be launched.
Thank you very much. I very much agree with you, Tassilo, that when you compare the environmental footprint of our products, you should take also into account the infrastructure, which is, and that's a completely different calculation when you compare things, taking into account the infrastructure development cost. Now, thank you for the organizers. Thanks to the organizer, I now have access to the questions from the audience. And there are questions on air traffic management. How are you going to deal with air traffic management issues, especially around airports? Florian, you want to take that one?
Yes, happy to. I mean, another one of the demonstrations we did last year was as part of a EU, supported program. We were flying live, piloted actually, at Helsinki International Airport, and the idea was there to see whether a vehicle like the Volocopter can actually be fully integrated into existing air traffic management systems, which obviously, if you have the right instrumentation on board, is not a bigger issue. But in parallel, the intention was to see on how next generation air traffic management providers and their technology equipment would interact with the legacy systems. And we could show, I believe we had 3 different next generation technology providers on board the Volocopter in that particular demonstration. And we could show on how these 2 systems can actually interplay with each other. So coming back to the picture that we had earlier, I think at the beginning, if we start with a humble, point-to-point connection, scheduled operations, VFR with a pilot on board, we are absolutely perfectly integratable into what we already have. Of course, then in the longer run, to exploit the full potential, right, we want to have ultimately, 5G, fly all year round, all day round, and so on, really scaled, unscheduled services. That requires a lot of changes going forward, but I think we can start that journey in a very straightforward and humble way, as we have already demonstrated in, for example, Helsinki last year. So I believe it is absolutely possible, and we should all together, start to get on that journey.
Jörg-Peter, you mentioned UTM in your speech. You fully agree with Florian, I guess.
Absolutely. I think that's the right way to go, step by step. We have our conditions, pilot on board, integrating with existing infrastructure. But as Florian said as well, right, there's the next step to be prepared. There's a lot of work to be done. We're waiting for there's the deployment of the use-based regulation. There's the technology that comes with it. In the panel this morning, you could see Unifly and others talking about the next generation of air traffic management and UTM. And basically, again, this is a big effort that is for UA, of course, but it's a big effort that will digitalize the airspace at large. Our working group is adding small bricks to it as well. We are having already a kind of a lands service in the US that's operational. There's a couple of elements we are developing as well, and that we want to integrate actually into this future airspace management system or contribute to it. Yeah, so yeah, it's a big effort actually.
There are questions on the robustness of your products to bad weather, for instance, or to hacking, cyber attacks. How robust, how confident are you in the robustness of your products? I will start with Hugues on this. Bad weather operations, it's easy to do for you with such a light aircraft. And how about cyber attacks and cyber security? Hugues.
Well, I don't know about cyber attacks. It's not at all my field, but about the structure of the aircraft, I think that if you have to transport batteries, you have to design for very light aircraft. And therefore, that's a difficulty to be tackled, because with very light aircraft, you might lack a certain stability. So if you have multiple propeller, you can tackle that, but still it's a problem. And I know by discussing with, as I said at the beginning, the Living Tomorrow project, which is basically to have a building where the UAM, the aircraft, land on the top of the building. One of the main problem is how to land when you have big winds, because it's a very small target, and it's probably very difficult to control, even with a big helicopter. To land on a platform, it's difficult with high wind, etc. So it's a real question. So I'm not myself in the designing of such aircraft, but I think that it's a real problem with very light structure. But I prefer the other panelists' answer to that question, really.
Okay. So Jörg-Peter, compared to let's say traditional helicopter, how much more difficult is it to deal with high winds and bad weather?
It is more difficult. It is more difficult. The vehicles have a big wing. They also from the side. So if you have winds from the side, it's not so easy to maintain the stability basically along all axes, but especially on the vertical axis. So what we have done, we also took a step-by-step approach. We set a kind of a target and said we want to have a 90% kind of availability of the aircraft. So in weather conditions of a typical city, and we selected kind of the baseline points for which we design the aircraft to according to that. So we're saying, okay, we do not need to operate in all weather conditions, but at least 90% in a certain set of cities. We want to be able to sustain the winds or the high temperatures or the altitude or a combination of all that. And that's how we go for it in the first step. Yeah? Obviously, we'll also try to make that more and more robust. But it's true, a helicopter is able to sustain wind relatively well. It's the rotor disc itself that tilts and moves. So it's a bit shielded. The cabin is a bit shielded from what's happening to the aerodynamic lift system, the rotor actually. Whereas in a UAM vehicle, the wing is generally rigid, or the propellers even are relatively rigidly connected to the vehicle. So it will also have an impact on the comfort and the kind of level on board. And in general, I think if you fly in a very difficult weather, it's probably not a very pleasant experience anymore anyway. So you will probably have to reduce or stop the service anyway if you have whatever tropical thunderstorms and stuff like that, because passengers will probably not want to fly in these conditions. Yeah. So a step-by-step approach and trying to increase the boundaries of the kind of weather conditions we can fly in.
Okay. Florian, your offer, your Volocopter offer is designed for only sunny cities where there is no wind. And by the way, you can also answer the question on cyber attacks, since you were the one mentioning an IT backbone, a digital backbone for your operation. So bad weather and then cyber attacks.
Yes, happy to. So, obviously there's certain physical limitations to a vehicle of a particular, weight. So there will be circumstances under which we just simply cannot fly. However, given the operational context in which, we intend to operate our vehicles, I think we can be extremely precise on when are we expecting to encounter, environmental conditions that do not make a flight suitable for this particular route for the next 20 minutes. So we can look at this in a much more precise manner than what we are used to dealing with environmental conditions from an aviation standpoint today. The second point is, with these new technologies come new opportunities. The Volocopter is a completely fly-by-light vehicle. So the pilot, or the operators, we like to call them, pretty much just tells the vehicle the direction to go. But that also opens up new opportunities. For example, we don't necessarily need to land on top of a building, right? We are currently, discussing in the respective working groups with EASA and other stakeholders to define, new approach pathways, for example. So what are acceptable pathways for these novel types of aircraft in city environment. And I believe this will also, enable us to go new paths going forward. But ultimately, environmental conditions will always have an effect, and we work hard to realistically mitigate those negative effects on our operations. The second question, the cybersecurity element, this is a really relevant topic. I think the industry has recognized it as such. I don't think there is an individual technology that answers that all encompassing. I think it's more about how do we design the overall system of ultimately autonomously flying eVTOLs in our cities, right? A system that consists of onboard capabilities, ground capabilities, satellite and mobile phone capabilities, and the whole interplay of the system needs to be set up in a way that we can ultimately ensure the same levels of standards that pay into the overall safety of our operations. And this is also something where there's a lot of industry cooperation happening, where we are, for example, partnering with DLR, DFS, and others in consortium to really come up with proposals for setting standards for the system to be implemented in a way that it satisfies all these needs. I think there are good historical examples that we can draw on. But obviously, again, the new technology poses new challenges, and we will have to adequately deal with them. So no specific answer here, but I can assure you that there's a lot of work going on with what I believe, very promising results in terms of that we are confident we will be able to provide an entirely safe system from the start.
Okay. Hugues, there is a question on standards. Do you think that we have enough standards available for UAM? And do you think that the stakeholders are investing sufficient effort into building those standards?
Yes, I think the recent publication of SC-VTOL by the EASA, Patrick, provides sufficient information as means of compliance to design against it. That's, for me, the problem is not really in the regulation themselves. It is how to achieve aviation quality standards with low-cost products. Because if you want to compete or be coherent with the existing ground transportation systems, taxis, etc., you have to offer an affordable ticket price, and therefore you need to perform a low-cost production. And it's only possible if you have big industrialization. Otherwise, you don't reach the quality standards. In aeronautics, everybody knows that a lot of money is spent on quality and reaching a very high level of quality, but we are not producing low cost. We are producing high cost products, and that's linked. But we are also producing small series of aircraft. Even the A320 with a rate of 50 per month before COVID was a very limited serial production. So if you want to reach the automotive price or close, not 10 times, you need big industrialization. So I don't think the products that we will be manufactured by the different stakeholders, and Lilium, Volocopter among them, will not meet the certification target. The problem is how to perform that at an affordable price. And that's, for me, a real challenge.
How do you answer to that, Tassilo, for instance?
No, it is exactly as was being said. It is a larger scale than everything that we know from aviation in the past, if everything goes well. And this is exactly how we also prepare for our manufacturing capabilities to be in place. So some of you will know that Jörg-Peter, who was actually in charge of the very A320 family production with Airbus and up to 3 aircraft being produced under his watch per day, is in the lead for our manufacturing. At the same time, we are combining his and his team's experience as much as possible also with experience from other industries. So there is also automotive people in our manufacturing team, even other industries such as health or so, where we can basically take advantage of doing it very greenfield, out of the blue for us as a project to build initial manufacturing. We do that in Munich. That is also important, I think, that initial manufacturing will happen on-site in very close proximity to engineering, to flight testing. Basically, after every flight that we're undertaking with the aircraft, at least the flight software is being updated, right? Based on data points that we would be collecting during flight testing. So everything is very, very closely interrelated. And this is why we have already committed and set up actually the production facilities for hundreds of aircraft being produced out of Munich initially, and then only over time, this will also be brought to other places for even larger capabilities then.
Florian, same question for you. Are you scaling up your operations to look like Airbus with the production rate of Airbus, or more like Volkswagen? What's your pick?
We are definitely also looking to really exploit the benefits that this technology can by bringing it right to the cities at scale. So very clearly, early on in our company history, we have decided to partner with automotive companies. I believe we have the best, automotive partners we could ask for. Right, we have Daimler as an investor and great strategic supporter of Volocopter. We have Dieter Zetsche in our board, the longtime former CEO. Of Daimler. So there's a great interlink, and clearly our perspective is to produce these vehicles at scale that are unprecedented in the aviation sector, right? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of vehicles ultimately in production volume. However, I do agree with Hugues saying that the certification requirements will have a significant impact on overall vehicle costs. That is true. These will be somewhat mitigated by the sheer scale across which we can then depreciate these initial development and certification costs, yes. And the second factor that gives me great confidence that we can still keep the cost of operations low is that, we don't intend to sell our vehicles. We want to operate the service ourselves together with our partners. And that then gives you a whole different cost perspective in terms of, cost per passenger, per mile, and so on, where the vehicle depreciation only plays a very minor part. So actually the operational costs play a much greater part, and other, elements are at play there. So ultimately, we are still confident, despite these very high safety targets that we have, and despite the very, high certification requirements, we will still be able to provide ultimately our service at a very affordable cost, slightly higher than today's taxi rides, but somewhere that is accessible to very, very large parts of our population.
Jörg-Peter, is it something that you are thinking about as well? Because obviously in Airbus you are used to develop helicopters or aircraft at a certain rate per month. So would you be prepared to scale up, or you want to position yourselves as the, Ferrari or Lamborghini of UAMs?
No, probably not, because UAM needs to create value for a broad part of the population in order to be accepted. So it's what we are trying to build is really a commercial transport system for passengers, and not kind of a very elitist niche, very small niche market only. So no, we need to think about industrialization and production. And what I can see in my company, it is a big challenge. Ramping up an A320 production obviously is another scale, but it's very difficult, and it takes years. And now we'll probably, going through the dip, we have to work on that again after the pandemic is over. So it's a really difficult challenge. Now we have two problems in UAM, and perhaps there's that's a bit of a nuance of what we were saying at the very beginning, what I was saying at the very beginning. Yes, it is not super easy actually to develop such an urban air mobility vehicle in terms of the structure, because we have this limited amount of energy on board, as we've heard. So we need to be extremely efficient from an aerodynamic point of view, but also from a structural point of view. And so the structure itself needs to be made according to very high performance standards, so very low weight structure compared to what you might have in other industries. And combining that with the challenge of ramping up the production very strongly and of producing it at a relatively low cost is not super easy. Now, scale will help, of course, but still there's a challenge to be tackled, and I would not be able to give the ultimate answer yet on how to crack that. But it's clearly a key element to making UAM successful.
I have one question on the maturity of the design. Florian and Tassilo, you seem to be quite how should I say, advanced in terms of maturity of your design, and Jörg-Peter a bit less, perhaps. So how mature is your design for all of you? So do you think that the target of 2025 is something feasible? It's also a good question for you, Jörg-Peter and Hugues. Are we going to see the first UAM systems, because I think it's a system of systems, available for operational use in 2025? So I will start with Florian.
Thank you. How convinced are you with the maturity of our design? We are extremely convinced that with the VoloCity that we have announced about 2 years ago, we have a vehicle that will meet all requirements of the special condition VTOL. So our confidence is extremely high, and we've made great progress together with EASA on advancing our vehicle and kind of coming up with all of the necessary means of compliance and so on, aligning the certification program. So I believe we have tangible traction there. We have been certified as an approved design organization by EASA, which we were extremely proud of, because it kind of gives us the credibility to be able to create these vehicles according to the necessary standards. So we have an extremely high level of confidence that we can get services, commercial operation services up and running within the next 2 to 3 years. Our internal timeline is 2 years. That's where we want to be bringing this to life, as we say.
Okay. Tassilo, how about you?
We have a bit more of a buffer actually in our timeline, obviously. We want to go live in terms of commercial operations by 2025. And given that buffer, we are very confident that we can meet this target. Actually, we were lucky to be in a situation to benefit basically from EASA's global thought leadership in terms of SC-VTOL having been confirmed quite early on in the process. Now the second tranche of MOCs will be published on December 9 by the authority, and we are very keen to see them and to close the design then in due course on basis of that. So very confident to meet the deadline from a vehicle as well as from a ecosystem and operational partnership perspective for the beginning.
How about you, Jörg-Peter? Are you still in the concept phase, or how advanced are you in terms of design of a product?
I would be a bit more cautious from our side, I have to admit. So with the vehicles that I showed you very, very briefly during the presentation are technology demonstrators. They are allowing us to set up our tool environment, gather data on all aspects of the flight mechanics, of the noise, everything structured, and they allow us to kind of prove that things are doable. However, a real product, a serious product that will be fully certified and then will be going to market at scale will look very different from what we are having here. So there's work to be done, and I think given the kind of experience that Airbus has in building flying devices, helicopters, and so on, it's generally it's a journey. You discover a lot of things in an uncertain environment like we are in with UAM, with a lot of elements having an impact on the vehicle, starting from the battery performance to all kind of technologies, all the way up to autonomous flight. All this will have actually kind of a lot of there's just a lot of work outstanding, I think, before we get it really to the standards that we can provide a commercial passenger transport system, that is at the highest safety standards. And I think it's a lot of things need to be we need to be sorted out beyond that, be it the noise and the public perception, be it the economics of the overall system, be it the entire be it the infrastructure of digital and kind of physical infrastructure on the ground, all these things, and the operational procedures, by the way, and the way to operate the vehicle, all these things need to be developed. So a real operation at scale, we would see it rather in about 10 years. than in 5, but that doesn't mean that there is not a possibility already in 5 years to have meaningful things flying.
Hugues, how about you? What's your take? When will we see the first UAM flying operational?
I think Tassilo and Florian are close to the target. The aircraft flies, the design is done, it's close to certification, I understand. So I don't have a lot of doubt about the design. It's more the economic side, which is my concern. And here, if I listen carefully, I think it's Florian who mentioned it. The business case is not only manufacturing a product, an aircraft, it's also operating it so that you can still, thanks to the scale and efficient operation, match the economics. So I don't know about that. I don't have seen the business case in question, but again, it's not on the design aspect I would have doubt.
Okay. Now, gentlemen, it's been a very exciting panel. I was very honored and pleased to moderate it. We are coming to a close now. I would like all of you to think about one sentence that you would like to say and leave our audience with before we say goodbye. And I will start with Jörg-Peter.
Good. Then the sentence is very quickly. I would just say, look at all this energy, at all these ideas, and all these dynamics we have in this industry. Let's bring that together. Let's bring it to the overall ecosystem that we need to build and make it happen.
Hugues.
I fully concur. Let us do it and make it happen. And we at ASD, we try our best to put a common point of view for all stakeholders in the classical aviation, I would say, on the subject. So yes, let's do it.
Florian, let's do it.
Absolutely. We have a perfectly viable vehicle with existing technologies. We have all necessary partners and stakeholders aligned. So I would say, let's get past the notion of talking and continue demonstrating and then ultimately launching our operational services.
And Tassilo.
It's a joint effort. It's a race to the moon, and let's make Europe win.
Thank you very much. So we are going to the moon, Europe will win, and let's do it. Those are the words which will conclude our session. Thank you so much to all the panelists, and I hand over to the operators and to the organizers. Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Patrick, and say hello to the dome from me, Cologne Cathedral, just a stone throw away from EASA, well, if you're there in the physical sense. Thank you to Hugues and Florian, Jörg-Peter. Thank you, Tassilo, for actually having dropped by in person. It's always a pleasure to actually, these days, have somebody on stage. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, Florian is going to continue working because he's going to switch digital rooms. He's going to be in the meet and greet area in a very short time to answer questions that may not have been answers up to now. Now, the next session, the next 90-minute session is going to start at past. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take you into the future, some old ideas taken into the 21st century, some brilliant ideas that haven't been there before, but all of which are presented by visionaries in their field. So we hope that a lot of you will switch on again or stay online for the future of air transport. Till then, bye-bye.